I asked you this last time you were here. Kash, you remember Mr. Peter Strzok and Ms. Lisa Page?
Yes, sir.
Mr. Strzok was an FBI agent. Ms. Page was an FBI lawyer. They were both very aggressive anti-Trump political activists who allowed their political opinions to affect their...
Based on credible information, no one. That's the FBI director under oath saying Jeffrey Epstein trafficked young women to no one else. Think about that. After years of questions, after years of public outrage, after everything people were told to expect, suddenly the answer is, there's nobody else to name? You buy that? Senator John Kennedy doesn't. And instead of letting it slide, he walks Kash Patel straight through it step by step. From political assassinations to FBI bias to who's really being fired and why, and then right into the Epstein files. And watch how Patel handles it. When it's easy, he takes credit. When it gets uncomfortable, he hedges. When it gets dangerous, he shrinks the scope of what you're allowed to know. This isn't just a hearing, it's a pattern. And you're about to see exactly how that pattern plays out when the questions get too close to the truth. Please subscribe our channel for further exclusive content. Let's play the clip.
You and the FBI, working with state and local law enforcement officials in Utah, have caught the assassin of Mr. Charlie Kirk. Is that right?
We have a suspect, yes, sir.
And you did that within 48 hours, did you not?
33 hours.
33 hours. Congratulations. We've had other political assassinations. Back in June, an assassin assassinated Representative Melissa Hoffman, Mr. Hoffman, Senator John Hoffman, and Mrs. Hoffman in Minnesota. You and the FBI and Minnesota state and local law enforcement officials caught the assassin within 48 hours, did you not?
I believe that timeline's correct, Senator.
Congratulations. Sometimes we miss the forest for the trees. Good work. Did Mr. Kirk's assassin act alone?
As I've said since the beginning, Senator, it is very much an ongoing investigation, and I can't speak to the state charges. That's for the state to address on their own, but we are providing them with the same investigatory findings we're parting the department. And as I noted to Senator, I believe it was Cornyn or Hawley, that there are a number of individuals that are currently being investigated and interrogated, and a number yet to be investigated and interrogated specific to that chat room. So we are very much in our ongoing posture of investigation.
So others could have been involved?
Yes, sir.
Okay. I asked you this last time you were here. Kash, you remember Mr. Peter Strzok and Ms. Lisa Page?
Yes, sir.
Mr. Strzok was an FBI agent. Ms. Page was an FBI lawyer. They were both very aggressive anti-Trump political activists who allowed their political opinions to affect their work at the FBI. Is that a fair statement?
I believe their text messages and their testimony that was secured by the OIG and DOJ speak for themselves.
In fact, Mr. Strzok and Ms. Page were having an extramarital affair, and at one point, Ms. Page texted Mr. Strzok, quote, "Trump's not ever going to be president, right? Right?" And Mr. Strzok replied, no, he won't. We will stop it, end quote. Ms. Page resigned from the FBI. Mr. Strzok was fired. They promptly sued the federal government and the FBI and Justice Department for releasing their emails, which revealed all of this. The FBI settled that lawsuit for $1.2 million, gave Mr. Strzok $1.2 million cash, gave Ms. Page, who resigned. She wasn't fired, she resigned, she quit. Gave her $800,000. Who, if the FBI made that decision to give them money?
That settlement was reached in the Biden administration when my predecessor was a director.
Who? Are you saying that Chris Wray did?
The only people that can decide that settlement are the Attorney General in conjunction with the director and the administration.
Okay, so you're telling me that Attorney General Garland and Director Wray decided to give them the money. Is
Yes,
that right?
sir. Yes, sir.
Okay. Now, when you took over the FBI, did you find instances of where, under the Biden administration, the FBI had weaponized the agency to push the political beliefs of President Biden?
Sorry, the last part.
When you took over the FBI, did you find instances of where the Biden administration had politicized the FBI to prosecute its political agenda?
Well, I won't speak for other people. Haven't been a target of that weaponization, haven't been a staffer on the House Intelligence Committee, having had the Justice Department weaponized against me for making the findings and leading the investigation of Russiagate. I know what that feels like. And that's why, as the FBI director, I'm committing to not ever have that ever happen again. But I'm also committed to fully investigating what was done. And that matter is still ongoing.
So I assume, I take it your answer is yes.
Yes, sir.
And you're firing those people, is that right?
Anyone that politicizes their job at the FBI will not work at the FBI.
Okay. You've heard some of my colleagues either implicitly or otherwise suggest that you have politicized the FBI to prosecute the political beliefs of President Trump. Is that true?
I don't know how that can be true when the stats that I cited, to include the 23,000 arrests, 6,000 weapons seized, 1,600 gang and criminal enterprise organizations, 4,700 children found and rescued, more enough fentanyl seized to kill a third of America. The men and women of the FBI are now on an apolitical mission, and this is why the numbers are historic.
Have you fired people because they voted for Vice President Harris?
I don't ask people who they vote for, and neither does the FBI.
Okay. But you've given people polygraphs, have you not?
Many people in the FBI take polys.
The FBI does that all the time.
Yes, sir.
Does it not?
Yes,
For
sir.
a long time, is that correct?
Decades.
All right. I want to ask you about the Epstein files. Have you seen the Epstein files?
I have not reviewed the entirety of it myself, but a good amount.
Okay. Would it be fair to say that Mr. Epstein trafficked young women, including, in some instances, minors, for sex to himself?
That was specifically the allegations in the 2018 indictment in the Southern District of New York.
Okay. Who else did he traffic these young women to?
In terms of what the investigation, again, going back to 2008, Mr. Acosta, who limited the investigation and limited the search warrants and limited the parameters of the investigation, the only thing we are able to speak to publicly, because he was given a non-prosecution agreement by Mr. Acosta, is that first time period from, I believe, don't quote me on this, 97 to 2001-ish. And then when the Trump administration courageously reopened it.
Excuse me for interrupting, but I'm going to run out of time. You've seen most of the files. Who, if anyone, did Epstein traffic these young women to besides himself?
Himself. There is no credible information. None. If there were, I would bring the case yesterday that he trafficked to other individuals. And the information we have, again, is limited.
So the answer is no one?
For the information that we have.
In the files?
In the case file.
Okay. Now, President Trump has deferred to the FBI and the Department of Justice with respect to the Epstein records. He says it is your call about releasing them. And I understand that the department and the agency have decided to release them in cooperation with the House committee. Is that correct?
Yes, sir.
So you're releasing them a little bit at a time. Is that correct?
We're releasing as much as we can, but we are limited by 3 different court orders, and the department went back to each of those judges to waive those court orders or have them lifted, and each of those judges declined.
Will you release all of them, or at least as many as you can?
We will release everything we are legally permitted to do so. We are continuing to work with the House on the subpoena request. We have substantially complied with it, but we will continue to release whatever we are legally permitted to do so.
Okay. I strongly encourage you to do that, Kash. This issue is not going to go away. And I think the essential question for the American people is this. They know that Epstein trafficked young women for sex to himself. They want to know who, if anyone else, he trafficked these young women to. And that's a very fair question. I want to know that answer. And I think you're going to have to do more to satisfy the American people's understandable curiosity in that regard.
Mr. Chairman, may I just respond to that? I agree, Senator. And what we have done, and just to remind folks, the Epstein case files existed in the 2 prior administrations, in the Obama administration and the Biden administration. And they didn't release anything. And there was President Trump in the first administration that renewed charges against Mr. Epstein. And I know it's a little complicated to understand, but what exists in the Epstein case files was a direct result of the limited search warrants from 2006 and 7, which hamstrung future investigations because of the non-prosecution agreement. And multiple administrations had the opportunity to look at the entirety of that case file and recommend prosecutions against anyone that was trafficked under Mr. Epstein and anyone that participated in that trafficking. And the only person to bring charges was the prior administration against Mr. Epstein. Now, I am not saying that others were not trafficked and others were not involved. What I am telling you is that based on the information we have, and we have continuously and publicly asked for the public to come forward with more information. If there is, we'll look at it. But based on credible information, we have released all credible information, and the information that the Department of Justice and the FBI never releases is information on investigations that are not credible. And we don't release the names of victims who weren't credible, but in the same time, we don't release the names of victims who were credible. And so that's by law. And so the information we are releasing now is historic, and it is also to the maximum capacity that the law allows. And I know that's not going to satisfy many, many, many people. But if they wanted it done right, then the investigation from its origination should have been done right, and he should not have been given a get-out-of-jail-free card to do jail on the weekends for 12 hours a day, and he should have been investigated fully for the entirety of his crime and criminal enterprise, not just from 19...
All right, now watch how this exchange unfolds, because on the surface it looks calm, even friendly, but underneath, there's a lot going on. Kennedy opens by praising Patel. He brings up the assassination cases, Charlie Kirk, then the Hoffmans in Minnesota, and highlights the speed. 33 hours in one case, roughly 48 in another. And Patel confirms it, says they have a suspect, acknowledges the timeline. So right out of the gate, Patel is being handed a win. And this matters because it sets the tone. This isn't an ambush. This is a setup where Patel is given credibility first. Now watch what Kennedy does next. He pivots from praise to uncertainty. He asks, did the assassin act alone? And Patel immediately shifts into ongoing investigation mode. Says multiple individuals are being looked at, mentions a chat room, says more people are being interrogated and still need to be investigated. That's not a clean answer. That's a widening of the scope, So even in a moment where he's being congratulated, there's already a subtle signal. The story isn't as simple as it first sounded. Now Kennedy moves to something very different: Peter Strzok and Lisa Page. And this is deliberate. He's reaching back to one of the most politically charged controversies inside the FBI. Agents whose personal political opinions were exposed and raised questions about bias. Kennedy lays it out bluntly: anti-Trump activism, text messages, the infamous exchange suggesting they would stop Trump. Patel doesn't dispute that characterization. He points to their texts and prior investigations into them. Then Kennedy brings up the settlement: $1.2 million for Strzok, $800,000 for Page. And here's the key moment: who approved that? Patel says it happened before his time, points to the prior administration, the prior director, and the attorney general. So now the frame is shifting. Kennedy is building a narrative. The FBI, under previous leadership, paid out significant money to individuals accused of political bias, and Patel positions himself as separate from that decision. Now watch how Kennedy turns that into a broader question. He asks, "When you took over, did you find evidence that the FBI had been weaponized for political purposes under the previous administration?" Patel doesn't answer directly at first. He talks about his personal experience, says he felt targeted when he worked on investigations tied to Russiagate. That's important. He's not citing a documented internal finding here, he's invoking personal experience. Then he says he's committed to making sure that kind of weaponization doesn't happen again, and that investigations into past conduct are ongoing. Kennedy simplifies it: "So your answer is yes?" And Patel agrees. Now pause here, because this is where the narrative flips. Earlier, Patel distanced himself from alleged politicization under prior leadership. Now he's affirming that politicization existed and implying he's correcting it. So Kennedy presses the obvious follow-up: "Are you firing those people?" Patel's answer is broad: "Anyone who politicizes their job will not work at the FBI. That's not a list. That's a principle. But principles can be applied in very different ways depending on who's making the call. And that's exactly where Kennedy goes next. He says, your colleagues have suggested that you are politicizing the FBI in favor of Trump. Is that true? And this is where Patel does something we've seen before. He doesn't engage the accusation directly. He pivots to numbers: 23,000 arrests, 6,000 weapons seized, 1,600 gang and criminal enterprise organizations targeted, 4,700 children found and rescued. Fentanyl seizures large enough, he says, to be devastating. He presents this as proof of an apolitical mission. But stop and think about that. Kennedy asked about politicization. Patel responded with performance metrics. Those are not the same thing. You can have high arrest numbers and still have political influence shaping priorities. You can produce results and still have questions about how decisions are made. So this isn't an answer, it's a deflection wrapped in statistics. Now Kennedy zeroes in. He asks directly, "Did you fire people because they voted for Vice President Harris?" Patel says no. He doesn't ask how people vote. That's a clear denial. But Kennedy doesn't stop there. He shifts to polygraphs. Have you given people polygraphs? Patel says yes, many people take them. It's standard. It's been happening for decades. And here's why that matters. Kennedy is drawing a line between formal neutrality, we don't ask who you vote for, and internal scrutiny mechanisms that could still be used to test loyalty in other ways. He doesn't accuse directly, he builds the implication. Now we move into the Epstein files. And this is where the exchange gets really consequential. Kennedy asks if Patel has reviewed them. Patel says not entirely, but a significant portion. Then Kennedy establishes a baseline. Epstein trafficked young women, including minors, for sex. Patel agrees that was part of the indictment. Then comes the question everyone's been waiting for. Who else were these young women trafficked to? And Patel goes into the history, talks about earlier investigations, limitations, the non-prosecution agreement, the constraints placed on what could be pursued. But Kennedy cuts through all of that. He brings it back to now. You've seen the files. Who else? And Patel's answer is stark. Based on the information they have, there is no credible evidence that Epstein trafficked those women to other individuals. Let that sink in. After all the public speculation, all the attention, all the expectation, that's the answer. Now, to be precise, Patel does not say it never happened. He says based on the credible information available, they don't have evidence of it. That's a narrower claim. But in practical terms, it means the same thing for prosecutions. No cases to bring. And Kennedy doesn't let it go. He shifts to transparency. Trump, he says, has deferred to the FBI and DOJ on releasing the files. Patel confirms they are releasing what they can. But again, there are limits, court orders, legal restrictions, judges who decline to lift those restrictions. So now the issue becomes not just what's in the files, but what the public is allowed to see. Kennedy presses, will you release everything you can? Patel says yes, everything legally permitted. That sounds straightforward, but notice the qualifier, legally permitted. That's where the boundary is drawn, and Kennedy makes the political point clear. This isn't going away. The public wants to know who else was involved. And from his perspective, that's a reasonable question. Now Patel responds at length, and this is where he reframes the entire issue. He points to previous administrations, says the files existed then, says they didn't release anything, credits the Trump administration with reopening the case and bringing charges. He also explains the structural limitations, the earlier non-prosecution agreement, the restricted scope of warrants, the way early decisions constrained later investigations. And here's the key distinction he draws. They release credible information. They do not release information tied to investigations that aren't credible. And they don't release victim names, whether credible or not, because of legal protections. So from his perspective, what's being released now is both unprecedented and legally constrained. But he acknowledges something important. He says, this won't satisfy people. That's an admission. He knows the public expectation is larger than what the evidence and the law allow him to provide. And then he makes the final point. If people wanted a complete picture, the investigation should have been done properly from the beginning. That's where he places responsibility on earlier decisions that limited what could ever be uncovered. Now step back and look at the whole exchange. Kennedy gives Patel credit, then tests him on bias, then tests him on accountability, then pushes him into one of the most sensitive topics imaginable. And throughout it, Patel follows a pattern. When the topic is operational success, he's confident, detailed, specific. When the topic is political influence, he broadens, generalizes, avoids specifics. When the topic is legally sensitive, he narrows the scope to what can be proven and what can be released. That's the through line. And whether you see that as caution, strategy, or deflection, that's the judgment this hearing leaves you with. There you have it, folks. Let me know what you think in the comments.